The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It poured relentlessly, as if the heavens themselves were mourning with Amir. The world outside the hospital window was a blur of grey and silver, streaks of water racing down the glass like tears. Inside, the harsh white light of the corridor seemed colder than usual, and the smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air. Amir sat on the hard wooden bench, his hands clasped together so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. He wasn't praying, not really. He had prayed already. He had begged, bargained, whispered promises to a God he wasn't even sure was listening anymore. Now, he just sat in silence, waiting for news that might shatter him completely. Through the small square window of the ICU, he could see the rhythmic blinking of machines keeping his younger brother, Adil, alive, or something close to it. The boy who used to chase him through the house, laughing until he couldn't breathe, now lay motionless beneath a tangle of wires and tubes. His chest rose and fell with the help of a machine, not his own will. Amir's throat tightened every time that sound filled the room, a slow, mechanical breath, like time itself was holding on for him. It had happened so suddenly. A phone call in the middle of the night, the kind that freezes your blood before you even answer. "There's been an accident," the voice had said, flat and unfamiliar. Amir remembered running through the rain that night, his shirt clinging to his skin, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. He arrived at the hospital drenched, gasping, his shoes soaked with mud. He remembered the sight of his mother collapsing in the waiting area, his father standing in silence, stone-faced, broken inside. The world had turned upside down, and nothing made sense anymore. Now, 3 days later, he was still here, half alive, surviving on bitter coffee and sleepless nights. People came and went. Friends visited, offering their condolences, their hollow encouragements. "Stay strong," they said, as if strength was something you could pull from your pocket and wear like a jacket. But strength felt like a foreign word. What did it even mean? To smile when your heart is bleeding. To say, "I'm fine," when every cell in your body screams otherwise. The doctor's voice still echoed in his head, words like, critical condition, brain trauma, no guarantees. Each one landed like a blow. Amir wanted to scream, to break something, to turn back time, anything to stop this crushing sense of helplessness. Instead, he just sat there, staring at the window, counting the blinks of the monitor like a cruel metronome of fate. Sometimes, his mind drifted to memories, the two of them riding bikes through narrow streets, Adil's laughter echoing behind him, late-night talks about dreams and plans, the way Adil used to call him, Amy Bye, with that teasing grin. Now that grin was gone, replaced by silence and machines. Every memory felt like a knife, cutting deeper into his already wounded soul. His phone buzzed occasionally, messages from friends, colleagues, distant relatives. He ignored most of them. What could he say? That he was fine. That everything would be okay. It wouldn't. The world had tilted, and he couldn't find his footing again. As the night deepened, the rain softened into a drizzle, tapping lightly against the glass. Amir's eyes were red from exhaustion, but he couldn't close them. He feared that if he slept, something would change, that he'd wake to silence on the other side of the glass. So he stayed awake, gripping his brother's jacket folded in his lap, inhaling what little scent remained of him, a mix of cologne and laughter and life. And as the clock ticked past midnight, Amir whispered into the empty corridor, barely audible, "Please, don't go." His voice cracked, the words dissolving into the quiet hum of the machines. Outside, the rain began again, steady and relentless, as if the sky, too, refused to let go. Days turned into weeks, and the world outside Amir's window kept moving as if nothing had changed. The buses still honked in the morning, shopkeepers still shouted prices on the street, and children still laughed on their way to school. But inside Amir's apartment, everything was silent, too silent. The walls seemed to echo with absence. The faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound that reminded him he was still, somehow, alive. After the funeral, people stopped visiting. Life went back to normal, for everyone else. For Amir, there was no normal. He'd wake up every day to the same heaviness in his chest, a dull ache that refused to fade. He would sit at the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, trying to remember what mornings used to feel like before tragedy hollowed him out. Breakfast lost its taste, music lost its rhythm, and sleep became an unwelcome stranger. His job began slipping away. He started missing deadlines, ignoring calls from his boss, and turning in half-finished reports. Eventually, he stopped going altogether. He'd look at his reflection in the mirror and barely recognize the man staring back, unshaven, eyes sunken, expression lifeless. He wasn't angry or sad anymore. He was just empty. One evening, desperate to breathe air that wasn't filled with grief, Amir went for a walk. The city lights glowed faintly through the drizzle, and puddles shimmered like broken mirrors under his feet. He wandered aimlessly until he found himself in a quiet park. The benches were slick with rain, the grass smelled of earth, and somewhere far off, a dog barked into the night. Amir sat down beneath a dim streetlight, his umbrella dripping beside him, and stared into the distance. An old man sat on the next bench, feeding pieces of bread to pigeons that weren't even there anymore, just out of habit, it seemed. He glanced at Amir and smiled faintly, his eyes kind but knowing. "You look like you're carrying something heavy, son," he said. His voice was raspy but gentle, like the whisper of an old song. Amir managed a weak smile. "It's nothing," he muttered, though the lie tasted bitter. The old man nodded slowly. "You can't escape pain by running from it," he said, tossing another crumb into the dark. "You walk through it, one step at a time." The words hung in the air, simple but heavy. Amir didn't reply. He didn't even fully understand why those words hit him so hard, but they did, like someone had reached into the fog of his grief and lit a single, fragile candle. That night, he went home and sat by the window for hours. For the first time since the accident, he didn't fight the memories. He let them come, the laughter, the fights, the plans he and Adil had made. He cried, not like the controlled tears of the hospital days, but deeply, freely, until it felt like something inside him had loosened. The next morning, Amir found an old notebook and began writing. Not for anyone else, just for himself. He wrote letters to Adil, the kind of conversations they never got to finish. He told him about his dreams, his regrets, and his guilt. Every word felt like a thread stitching his shattered pieces together, one sentence at a time. Days later, he began taking morning walks. At first, they were short, just around the block. The air felt strange in his lungs, heavy but cleansing. With each step, the world started to return in fragments, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the sound of a mother calling her child, the soft touch of sunlight after rain. He still carried the pain, it didn't vanish, but he began to understand that maybe it wasn't supposed to. Pain wasn't a wall to break through, it was a path to walk. Slowly, Amir started living again, not to forget, but to honor what he had lost. And every now and then, when the breeze brushed past his face just right, he could almost hear Adil's laughter in it, faint, fleeting, but enough to remind him that love doesn't die. It just changes shape. Months later, the air around Amir felt lighter, though the weight in his heart had never fully disappeared, it had simply learned to rest differently. Grief had changed its form, it was no longer a sharp blade, but a quiet companion that walked beside him. He had started volunteering at a local youth center, a small place tucked between two aging buildings. It wasn't planned, he had stumbled upon it one afternoon during one of his long walks. The sign outside read, "Youth Haven, Building Strong Minds." Something about the words made him stop. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just time. Inside, the center buzzed with the restless energy of young people, laughter, arguments, music, and the occasional slam of a door. At first, Amir only helped with small tasks, arranging chairs, fixing broken fans, painting walls. But over time, the director, a warm woman named Sarah, noticed the quiet strength in him. "You've seen darkness," she said one day, "and people who've been there are the ones who can guide others out of it." So, when she asked if he could speak at a weekend gathering, just to share something about dealing with life's hardships, Amir hesitated. Public speaking wasn't his thing. But something in him whispered, "Answer the call." The same phrase the old man's words had sparked months ago. He agreed. That Saturday, he stood before a small group of teenagers and young adults seated in folding chairs. The air was thick with anticipation, and he could see fragments of his younger self in their faces, curious, uncertain, and silently struggling with invisible battles. His palms were sweaty, his heart beat fast, but his voice, when it came, was steady. He didn't start with advice or quotes. He started with the truth. "There was a time I didn't think I'd make it," he said quietly. "A time when getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain." The room grew still. He spoke about a deal, not just about his death, but about his life. The late-night laughter, the plans, the bond they shared. He talked about the accident, the silence that followed, and how he had tried to escape the pain, only to realize that running made it worse. "I thought strength meant pretending I was fine," Amir said, his eyes drifting to the floor for a moment. "But real strength, it's allowing yourself to break, and still choosing to stand up again." As he spoke, something shifted in the room. The faces that had been distant began to lean in. Some nodded slowly, others wiped their eyes discreetly. Amir talked about the night in the park, the old man, the words that changed everything. He explained how pain doesn't vanish when you face it, it transforms you. "Tragedy doesn't end you," he said. "It remakes you into someone wiser, someone more compassionate." He paused, letting silence fill the room before continuing softly, "Stress, pain, tragedy, they're not punishments. They're calls. Calls to rise, to learn, to live differently. When life breaks you, it's asking you a question: will you stay shattered, or will you rebuild?" When he finished, no one moved at first. Then, quiet applause began, gentle, heartfelt, growing louder. One of the girls in the front row, tears streaking her face, whispered, "Thank you." Amir smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes for the first time in months. After the session, people came. To him, some to hug him, others just to say his words made him feel less alone. That night, as Amir walked home beneath the clear sky, he looked up at the stars and thought of a deal. He no longer felt the suffocating ache he once did. Instead, he felt presence, as if his brother walked beside him, silent but proud. The next morning, Amir sat at his desk and opened his notebook. At the top of a fresh page, he wrote, "Answer the call, not with fear, but with faith." Then, for the first time, he signed his name beneath it, not as a man broken by tragedy, but as one reborn through it. And as sunlight spilled through his window, he realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain. It was about learning to live fully, even with the scars, and helping others do the same.